the first bit of news, and I picked the news this week. I did it sort of while I was on vacation. I'm like, oh, this news story sounds awesome to talk about. The first one is one that I'm really excited for and wish I could find the freaking TV series that they made. Or the one episode of a TV series that they made back in 2013. And that is Peter Panzerfaust is returning to print this November. Curtis J. Wiebe had announced a while back ago that he was going to be taking a break from this, or from the series, which originally started as a 5-issue miniseries, but then quickly grew because of popularity back in February 2012. And this, I am so excited to see this because it's set for the run is set for 30 issues, and so we got 7, in theory we have 7 more issues, but if there's more to this story, I would love to see that again, or see more come out of it.
So we should mention that Curtis didn't just take a break from this. He took a break from Rat Queens, which obviously had gone through some hardships with losing one of the co-creators on it because of the circumstances outside of the book, and then replacing the artist with Stephen, whose last name I could never pronounce, so I'm not even going to try. And then Stephen had to take a step back from it, and then they replaced Steve. Oh, and I can't even think of her name with another artist. Yeah,
Tess Fowler was the Barda one shot.
She did the Barda one shot, and then she started doing the book regularly. But then all of a sudden, it got basically put on hold, and there was some back and forth between her and Curtis about, is it because he's bringing the original artist back or what? And I don't know the ins and outs of that, so I don't want to really speak about their working relationship. But it was a bum deal because Rat Queens was a beloved book, but it's hard to recover from losing what is considered one of the main creators on the book so early on, when it's just getting heat, and then going through 2 more creative changes so quickly. So it's got slowed up. So it makes sense that he would want to relaunch, but he took a step back from a few things, and then he started doing Bounty from Dark Horse Comics recently, which seems to have more in common with Rat Queens than there's other stuff. But yeah, people have been asking for a while, when is Peter Panzerfaust going to come back? And it's nice that it's not just going to get left in the lurch and not return and never see a conclusion.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly with how it ended, it did seem like it ended in a bit of there it is sort of deal. It didn't seem like it ended in on good terms sort of deal. And here, for the video viewers, I'm actually sharing the cover, and it's cool for those people who don't know what Peter Panzerfaust is. This is the take Peter Pan told through World War II. And one of the things I love the most about this book is the fact that the first 2 volumes are told through the eyes of 2 separate characters. None of this is told through Peter's point of view, like you typically see with the cartoons or anything like that. This is told. The first one is oh gosh, I can't think of any of their names now. But it's told through the Lost Boys. And it's an incredible tale that happened, that the show experienced here. And I don't know where my camera went. And with where it ended, it didn't seem like a natural ending. It wasn't like, oh, everything's all hunky-dory. It was just sort of, it's done. Like, it's like, oh, here we go.
He says that it's been on hiatus because they weren't able to afford to do it full time, and part of that is also Image Books. It's on the creator a lot of the costs. It's not like getting published by Marvel or DC, where the publisher is footing the bill for everything up front, and you just collect your paycheck for it. This is, I mean, the creators have to essentially pay for these things to come out, and
Mhm.
if a book isn't at a certain point of money, then it's difficult, and it may make it back up on the trades, it may not, but it's always kind of tough to say. Now, Peter Panzerfaust, if it had been
Yeah.
finished when Rat Queens had started to take off, then it may be people go, oh, well, I really enjoy Rat Queens, I'll go back and read Peter Panzerfaust. But the book had already kind of started to go on hiatus around that time. So it made people question, well, is this guy ever going to finish this? I don't want to get too invested in this series if it's just never going to complete.
And the other part I mentioned was the 2013 TV pilot, is what I guess we can call it. And I want to see if there is only 7 more issues, so essentially, another trade coming out of this, and it wraps up the story nicely. I would love to see a Peter Panzerfaust movie, or even couple of movies out of this, because I do think it would work really well, be a fun, interesting take, one on the World War II war movies, but two on the take of Peter Pan.
Yeah, the only problem though is that the most recent tries at Peter Pan have not done very well in the theater, and those were big budget, big name actor films, and it's been difficult. I think, and this is something that I've kind of been seeing a lot and get more frustrated with all the time, is that we keep seeing takes of the same stories done over and over again. I talked about this on the episode of Geek Cinema Society I was on not too long ago, which I don't think has actually come out yet. With everybody seems to want to do, everybody seems to want to do a version of Peter Pan, and everybody wants to seem to do a version of Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz, or any number of things. They just get done over and over, and I think we can only go so far of like, okay, I get it. So this is a dark version of Alice. I've seen that a dozen times already, and this is a steampunk version of the Wizard of Oz, but it's still the fucking Wizard of Oz, and this is a German version of Peter Pan. But they're not new stories; they're just new places for the stories to take place. And I think that's kind of, unfortunately, that seems like something that Hollywood would jump all over, because Hollywood's not interested in new stories. They're interested in the same story told over and over again. But we're seeing that that's kind of been a failing for them recently. This summer especially has had a lot of backlash on that. So I don't know if that would necessarily be like someone's going to jump over this, even if it is finished, and say, oh, we have to make a movie out of this now because it's Peter Pan in Nazi Germany. But yeah, the Peter Pan, no one's buying it. And if the book struggled too, and they couldn't even get it to finish when it was meant to originally, it's going to make it an even harder sell, which is not to say that it can't happen. There's something about something that's complete versus something that's still in the middle of it, unless you're Mark Miller, in which case you can sell your property before you've even put out issue 1, and we'll be lucky if we see issue 2 in the first 6 months after. But be that as it may, glad that he's coming back to finish up the book. For the fans of it, I think that's an incredibly important thing to do. I think as a creator, it's a promise you make to your readers to tell a story to its conclusion, or at least to a satisfactory one. And so I really respect him for finishing this up.
Yeah. The next bit of news is that Kieran Gillen teases a new Marvel project. You might know Kieran Gillen as the writer of The Wicked and Divine, which he does that with the artist Jamie McKelvey, or you might know them from Young Avengers over at Marvel. The last volume of that book, they both did the writing and art for. I almost said arting. And he announced that he's returning to Marvel to do an unannounced ongoing series. well, no, I shouldn't say returning, because he's been doing the Star Wars Darth Vader series since July of 2015, and he's referring to the project simply as the unannounced Marvel thing, which he wrote on his blog. And so far, there are 2 issues written, inks arriving for the first issue, which are an utter delight. I think people will love it. Direct quote from his blog. Um, and this is actually pretty cool. And the news also came as a part of a rundown of his current and future projects, which include the Ludocrats, an unannounced horror comic with a music bent, and of course the Wicked and Divine, which he said is about at the halfway point.
And
Now,
his phonogram stuff, which is
yeah,
probably my favorite work that I've read of his. But even before Young Avengers, he did the Loki series that was about the young Loki character. He's done quite a bit of stuff. He worked on Iron Man, I think, for a while,
yeah,
and did some X-Men stuff
um,
too. And
yeah.
then he's one of those
It's
people who works over at Avatar, which is that company that just like has a lot of big name writers that work on their stuff, but every single bit of it is just like something I cannot imagine anybody wants to read.
now he is. I should know, because I even looked at the source of his at his Tumblr page. Sorry, and he is not. There is no future phonogram planned at this point. The future projects are the Ludocrats, um, an unannounced 5 issue thing, a horror comic with a music bent. I've said this is coming from there. I've said I'd write it for someone for over a year now, and really should get down to it. That hasn't been urgent, means I haven't had to prioritize it, but now I'm ahead on basically all my works by a considerable amount, means I really should. I believe this will be 2017 or maybe early 2018. One off WFH issue. I can't think what that abbreviation is. And then the Spangly New thing, and also there is one.
WFH is probably work for hire.
Okay. And then there's the graphic novella, which was an edit. An artist and a friend of his are talking about doing a short form thing, quote unquote, thing, 44 to 60 pages, much more indie comics than people will be used to from me or from him. A love story of all sort. And this whole list just sounds awesome. And it's the one that shocks me the most. And it's not even the Marvel thing. It's the Wicked and Divine that we're halfway done, because with where he's went so far in these first 4 volumes, I sort of want to say, like, holy fuck. Like, if he's going to be going further, then oh my gosh, this dude is a madman.
I mean,
Because
that he is a pretty prolific guy. His stuff really stands out to me. I don't know that he's considered one of the top writers in the industry, although his Darth Vader series has, I've seen nothing but acclaim for it.
yeah,
But he's got that nice bit of quirkiness that I think that an independent person, a Vertigo reader, someone who enjoys things like Sandman or Preacher would take to Gillen's stuff very well. But he can do mainstream stuff too, but just give it enough of a weirdness that it feels original. It feels like something that you wouldn't expect out of that book, but when you see it happen, it works.
yeah. One of the things that actually turned me on to him was because he was writing Young Avengers about the time I truly got into comic books. And I mentioned on a hiccup in Galactic Radio about the about getting the tablet that Glenn Rubinstein gave me, and that Young Avengers was one of the series that was on there. Like the first couple issues, and then it was up to me to pick up and keep downloading the issues as it went along of Young Avengers. And what you pointed out to me later on was the fact that with that, and then Phonogram was another one, that he wrote them to music, and he actually had playlists that go with it. And I'm like, oh my god, this dude is brilliant. I love this. I love this dude's work. And now it's like, whenever whenever I see something that's by Kieran Gillen, it is a guarantee that I will at least check it out.
Yeah, and he's obviously not the first person to do that. I remember Devin Grayson, when she was writing the Titans series, she had playlists for each different character of how to help her get into the mindset of that character, like
Yeah.
what she would picture them listening to. And I've certainly done that with some of my writing too. But what he does with it is he involves the music in the story a lot. And I think
Yeah.
that's a little bit different than what you see in other things. And it
Yeah.
really
And
does stand out.
it works great with Wicked, or not with Wicked and Vine, with phonograms, because at the end, and I don't know for trades, but for the single issues, at the end and before they get to this the letters page, there's essentially the glossary of all the terms, because all the stuff takes place in the past. Like, I think it's what was like the late 90s, early 2000s, when the first couple volumes took place. And so he's keeping it all relative to that time with his references and all that stuff. So they give you like Ace of Base is a British pop band, or stuff like that. And even going into terms, and I'm like, oh wow, this is great.
Yeah, I
And
mean, Phonogram is something you should read with a Spotify playlist.
yes, yes, or Google Play playlist. But the next news story is the X-Men Inhumans Resurrection announced by Marvel. We haven't even gotten to the Death of X event, and they're already, here's the next one, or here's what's going to happen to the X-Men. And so what I'm hoping is there's going to be some sort of shakeup with this more than this, because like the article says, it does follow the Death of X, and Inhumans versus X-Men.
Yeah, the day that Marvel doesn't have an event plan to follow their last two events is the day I take a stapler to the nuts. I
Yeah.
just think that there's such a forced mentality of like, we're gonna make the goddamn Inhumans work, and it's not clicking. The only Inhumans things that have really worked, it's been Miss Marvel. And that's not
Yeah.
because she's an Inhuman. It's because she's a great character and she has a very fleshed out story, a fantastic writer. Everybody who's putting that book together has just put such care into this person. And like, the rest of the Inhuman stuff has just been superlative, and people aren't taking to it, and certainly not taking to it as a replacement for the X-Men. And as they've shit the X-Men into the worst corner imaginable, just to, I don't know, the rumor is to spite Fox. Like, why would we want the X-Men to be a successful series for them to just steal ideas for and keep making their crap movies that we don't get to have our hands in? It doesn't matter, because the X-Men have a long history of being a super successful book, characters that people have loved for 50 years. And the Inhumans have always been kind of not that. They've been around for about as long, but other than the main Inhumans family of Black Bolt and Medusa and Karnak and the original grouping, trying to stretch this out and do this thing with the Terrigon Mist going across the land and killing mutants that it comes in contact with. So again, fucking with the X-Men. But on top of that, like, here, we're going to give people random powers. They've done that kind of storyline before. There was a DC storyline in the 90s called Bloodlines. And again, the only thing from Bloodlines that had any real success was the book Hitman. And that's because it was done by Garth Ennis and John McCrae. So it was a cool character that a lot of great things happened with. Had dick all to do with the fact that it was from Bloodlines. The other one was Anima, and Anima only lasted briefly. The rest of the stuff just kind of went away in an instant because nobody cared for it. And I feel like this Inhumans thing, it's the same thing. They tried to force feed us that in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and to me, it's to the detriment of the show. The show, yeah, I think, is better when it's about S.H.I.E.L.D., and it's harder for me to enjoy when it's about all these random superpowered characters just because they want to show powers on there. The powers aren't that impressive. You're not giving me anything better than what I'm seeing on the other superhero shows. And those shows, it's the nature of the show. The nature of your show was a spy agency thing, and I thought that was way cooler. So it's just kind of, it's a lot of trying too hard at this point. And I mean, we don't know what Death of X really is yet, and what Inhumans versus X-Men, although I think I can kind of figure it out from the title. But Resurrection with a big X in there, because there's nothing more 90s than throwing an X in something where it doesn't actually belong to make it this word. Other than the fact that people are going to assume that it has to do with Wolverine coming back to life, the actual Wolverine, I don't know what else it's supposed to be. Maybe it's just bringing the X-Men back.
There's quite a few of them that this could mean, and because we are missing a lot of key X-Men characters in here. You mentioned Wolverine, but there's also Professor Xavier, the adult Cyclops, the adult Jean Grey, which she hasn't been around in the comics for a long time. Since I think the last time she was resurrected, but also but Emma Frost is not in there. I'm trying to think. There's a couple other ones I'm blanking on right now. And I'm pretty sure there are, but it was interesting because before we went live, I was watching a YouTube video on through that Dave subscribed to through the Galactic Netcast feed. So haha, that's in Dave's history. But it was it's this comic book guy explaining the beyond Omega level mutants with Matthew Malloy, who was written and introduced in the I believe it was Uncanny X-Men that Brian Michael Bendis was writing. It was an original Sin tie-in called the Last Will and Testament of Charles Xavier, and it gave this history of this incredibly powerful mutant, like so powerful that while Professor Xavier is training the original mutants how to use their powers, he's subduing Matthew Malloy just because of the fact that his powers are a lot like Franklin Richards, where it's reality warping sort of deals, but where Franklin is only limited to like his surroundings or what he knows. With Matthew Malloy, there were no limits, and so that's where we saw the death of essentially a lot of the mutants, like all the mutants of Cyclops, of Magic, of himself, only for him to then come back and all those other things. And the ending gets a little bit wonky, but things tend to happen when you have time travel involved.
Yeah, I still can't handle the fact that all these young versions of the original X-Men are still running around and are launching other team books and stuff. Like, I'm gonna say completely, I love Mark Waid, and I think Champions looks like it can be a really fun, great book. But I just don't understand why we have young Cyclops as the team leader for this other book, when in the reality of it, the long haul, that's got to go away. You can't keep this working. It's already way past ridiculous that these characters are still running around in the modern day with other versions of themselves. And it's just such a bad story. It was interesting for like a few issues, because it's like, okay, it's going to lead somewhere, but then it didn't lead anywhere. And it's bad enough that it didn't lead anywhere in its own book, but then to infect the rest of the Marvel Universe with that is just god-awful.
Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. I only really see that being a problem for the Beast character, and Beast and Iceboy, or not Iceboy, Iceman are the only two, because you look at everyone else. You have You have Warren. You have Angel, who his character it was just super fucked up until like yesterday, I want to say.
And that would
Then
be it would be
yeah,
perfectly okay if these guys came to the modern day and then their modern day equivalents disappeared. But why do we
which is the
need
case.
multiple versions of these characters running around? That's a thing that it's like, okay, do that, and that's almost interesting because then we get to see them in the modern day, but they're the real versions. Now they're just kind of like time displaced versions, and it makes no sense in the story that this is still happening. I mean, like as like when you have Reed Richards and Doctor Strange and Iron Man and all these other people walk around going, huh, this is really kind of fucked up though, right? I mean, we all get that this is fucked up and this should not be happening. Didn't Age of Ultron kind of teach us about this? Is that you don't mess with the time stream? Didn't Age of Apocalypse teach us this, that you don't mess with the time stream? It's just like, but we're gonna just let it mess with the time stream.
And they disciplined Beast on that, but then
But didn't fix the issue.
but no, because a mysterious force was preventing them from being sent back.
Yeah, that mysterious
Where they-
force is a shitty writer.
Well,
Bendis, I love you on other stuff, but your team book stuff is terrible. Go back to your single Spider-Man book.
which
That's great.
he's doing Iron Man and he's doing Spider-Man. I don't think he's doing a mutant or Inhuman book.
Well, I don't know that he's doing Iron Man the way that things are going, but
well, he's currently writing, as of our recording and as of the publishing calendar, he's writing Invincible Iron Man and International Iron Man.
yeah, and then eventually Doom Iron Man.
Yeah. Whether those are successful or well loved, who knows? That is for time to tell. But the fourth bit of story is one that you've probably heard before. And that is Netflix is bringing back the Mythbusters build team in the White Rabbit project. Now I've heard this as the original article I posted. They said that it wasn't called the White Rabbit Project. It was called the Mythbusters in Wonderland or something like that, which I think they probably stayed away from that one because of copyright issues. But so basically this is a it's a new series coming out on Netflix along the same lines with Bill Nye Saves the World, but this stars Tori Belleci, Carrie Byron, and Grant Imahara. And I'm excited for this. This is so freaking cool to me. Like, Netflix is really hitting on just hitting things out of the park here.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that Netflix in their quest for original content is, they're sort of rescuing old shows, but not exactly. They're making new shows from what was old shows. And you could argue that's sort of what they did with Fuller House. It's like they could have just brought back Full House and just called it Full House and have it be like the same characters, but obviously aged up, and now Danny's a grandfather and everything. And that's essentially what it is, except in this case, they're going to the next generation of the characters. Bill Nye Saves the World is a different take on what Bill Nye started with the Science Guy. The Mythbusters cast that are coming over to this show, yeah, it's too bad that they didn't get to keep with the Mythbusters name, and that may be a copyright issue somewhere. But these were people that when it got announced that they weren't going to be back for the last season, people were upset. People were really ticked off. And you could say, well, the Mythbusters were, these two guys originally, and we're just getting back to that. And that's all well and good. But these people were part of the beloved team as it went on. The show grew, and we didn't want to lose people that we enjoyed seeing.
It's one of those things that if for those people who want to say, well, but the Mythbusters were Adam Savage and Jamie Hyneman. Yeah, but if you watch those early seasons of Mythbusters, even when I think they brought in Carrie and Grant as like myth turns is what I believe what they called them at first. A lot those are hard for me to watch. And it's because of the fact that they have, um to keep it with the Discovery Channel, they have these folklorists explaining stuff with these myths. And from when they got away from that and more into the voiceover guy doing it, because they also had a voiceover guy in the beginning too, but it's like, well, why, so eventually someone in production was like, well, why are we paying someone to be a mouthpiece that isn't testing well or whatever, when we have voiceover guy who people are loving? Why not just go with voiceover guy and throw in clips from the movies or whatever else we're mything or we're busting the myth on, sort of deal? And so that's where, when people are sitting there going, oh, well, it's not like they don't have the original feel of the show, or it's not going to be good, it's not like the original, there's no Jamie or Adam. It's like, yeah, but then you might as well say, the other, I think her name was Scotty, who was a myth turn in there, isn't a part of this, or the folklorists that they would get in there are not a part of this. And it's like Bill Nye Saves the World, it is the next step in what will be done here. um and also, we're getting it really quick. They announced it this past weekend. They announced it Labor Day weekend, and it's going to be coming out December 9th. I don't think Netflix ever announced anything that's coming out that quickly. And that's
Yeah, I
cool.
mean,
That's
the filming of it is probably something different. It doesn't take the same amount of whatever
of
it
time, yeah.
was to make this stuff happen. And I mean, who knows how long they've been filming segments, and maybe it's just gotten announced to Netflix, but they were working on it for somewhere else, and it just kind of became uh whatever this is now.
Yeah. And they also announced or said that, um they gave some brief history that since Mythbusters came to a close, that Travel Channel has been hosting Carrie and Tori on Thrill Factor, which had an 11 episode run where they would travel around the country to try out the best rides and attractions that you could find, while Imahara has been working on the Star Trek Continues fan series as Mr. Sulu. And it's really cool to see. And so that is it for the news.